A number of surveys are showing that married couples say the pandemic has increased stress levels on their marriage. What's interesting and somewhat strange, though, is that a number of major media outlets have been making a case that divorce in the COVID-19 era is actually a good thing. Joining me to discuss this is Kimberly Holmes. She's the CEO of Marriage Helper, and she is joining me via Zoom from Nashville, Tennessee. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeanette. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Kimberly, can you first of all share a bit about yourself and about Marriage Helper?
Absolutely. So the best way I can explain about me is by giving you a little bit of the backstory of how Marriage Helper got started. And our founder, Dr. Joe Beam, and his wife, they had been married for about 15 years back in the 1980s before he decided that he felt like he could be happier with someone else and in a different situation. And he actually divorced his wife and left her and her two children. And they were divorced for 3 years. And during that 3 years, Dr. Beam himself would tell you that he became a person that he honestly didn't even like anymore. He went places he never thought he'd go, did things he never thought he'd do, and one day woke up and said, "What have I done?" He actually called his ex-wife back, her name is Alice, and asked her if she would take him back, to which she said, "No, I don't know. I mean, everyone in her life told her not to. Her family was saying, "You're already divorced. Why would you go back to this? How do you know you can trust him again?" But ultimately, Alice said to herself, "Do I believe that Joe, Dr. Beam, is a good person who has done some bad things? Or do I believe that he is a bad person who has done bad things?" And she knew at her core that he was a good man. And she believed it was the right thing to do, to take him back and to see if they could make it work. They remarried, and at first they did not love each other, but they figured out how to fall back in love with each other. And as a result, in celebration of that second marriage, they had a third daughter, which is me. And so I actually am a product of two people who were divorced, all odds against them, but saving their marriage. And from their story, they said, "How can we help people who are either going through this, or how can we help people so that they don't have to go through this?" And so in 1999, my parents developed, my dad specifically, a 3-day workshop that has been around for over 20 years now and has over a 70% success rate at saving marriages. And I got involved after college. Never thought I would go into this. That wasn't a plan of mine, but I caught the vision of the marriages that could be saved and the hope that needs to be put out there. And so I've been with Marriage Helper for 9 years now, and I owe my life to what Marriage Helper has done. But I've also been able to see thousands of people save their marriage and leave a legacy for their family as well.
Yeah, no kidding. And you obviously know firsthand about that coming from that family, and you probably saw things from a completely different perspective, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And another part of it is it's interesting that my sisters and I both have the same set of parents, but I have never experienced divorce and my sisters have. And you see the effects of that in the way that we live our lives. Even though my family is close, and my sisters have forgiven my father, and we are a close family now, there were still effects of what happened during those 3 years that that are just there. And so I see firsthand how divorce affects children. And I also see how I wasn't affected by it. And I have to tell you, I am passionate about helping children not have to experience that if they don't have to.
Yeah, it's interesting how you and your sisters have such different experiences with that, because they actually went through the divorce with their parents, whereas you were the product of it afterwards. So now, for viewers watching who might be divorced, this of course isn't about condemning anyone, right? But it does seem strange that some media outlets have been arguing that divorce in this COVID-19 era is actually a good thing. So what exactly do you believe is beneficial about it?
Well, let's talk about what the message is that's out there, because like you said, divorce, even for people who don't want it, sometimes is going to happen. Sometimes is going to happen. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about this message out there that is saying divorce is a first option, right? Like if you aren't happy or if you're too stressed out, then perhaps this is the next step for you. Just divorce, like it's an easy decision. Just divorce, and then you'll have 2 weeks to be completely focused on your work, to self-care, to get your massages, to do all the things, And then you can have 2 weeks to be a present parent. And that's just the new way to live your life. And there was a lot of articles in the past year that have gone out that have really been promoting this as an option. And that is what I believe we have to look out and say, research doesn't support this. Research, if we were to actually believe what we see of how divorce affects children and how divorce affects individuals, then we should know that we should do things to try and save the marriage before choosing to end it. And of course, there are people who are going to do those things to try and save the marriage, and the divorce still may happen. But at least when people have tried to save it and they can look at themselves at the end of it and say, I know I did everything I could, what we have seen is those people end up having a better future anyway for themselves as an individual, because they have learned how to be the best that they can be individually.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned children, of course. So is there any evidence that divorce could be good for kids, or evidence on the other side that it's got negative outcomes? I mean, there must be lots of research about this, and I'm sure you've looked at it all.
Yes, there is. I actually did my master's thesis in how divorce affects children. And so I've looked at the research, and a couple of the longitudinal studies are really interesting. And they say that, that when parents are fighting, and a lot of the narrative that we hear is, well, it's better for kids because they don't need to be in a home of parents who research calls high conflict, but basically the parents who they fight all the time. And here's what's true. The best thing for children, according to the research, is that the parents learn how to work through things and fix their problems, especially for the children to watch that happen. This is the best thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen for children is that parents divorce and continue to fight. How often is that what happens, though, where they do end up divorcing, but they still haven't worked through their issues? They still aren't co-parenting where they like each other, where they're amicable, where all of those things are happening. And that's the worst thing that can happen for children. So regardless of what happens, the two parents, when they're going to be co-parenting, have got to figure out how to co-parent well and to be friendly to each other and resolve their differences.
Absolutely. Now, you say that couples who take the time to invest in their marriages and get good counseling have a much higher rate of staying married.
Yes, absolutely. You know, a lot of people, I have seen it with the thousands we've worked with at Marriage Helper, when they come to us and they say, but there's just no hope. Our counselor has told us there's no hope, our pastor, our friends, our family, whoever it is. So I just don't know if this will work. I believe one of the obstacles for most people to even getting help in the first place is they just believe there's no hope, because they don't see in their direct life, their friends or family, they don't see the struggles people go through and work through. And so when we experience in the walls of our home where there's a disconnection between our spouse, there's no intimacy anymore, there's no more romance, no more passion, there's a lot of fighting, you can feel alone in that and you don't know what to do. And so what we have seen is when people at least begin to take that first step, and even if it's just one person to begin with, because it can just start with one person to begin to save the marriage. But even when they just begin to start that and get help and figure out what are the things I need to do for me, but also the best things to do to set a foundation to bring my marriage back together. But it's going to be helpful for me to know either way. We see so many times that it ends up being what saves their marriage, even if they thought at first that there was no hope for them.
Yeah, that's unreal. So why do couples choose not to get marriage help? Is it considered a stigma? Are they scared?
I think part of it. You know, there's a lot of reasons. One of the studies I even read just a couple of weeks ago talked about how, because the stigma of counseling and getting marriage help was so high, that most couples, over 60% of them, wait for 6 years after problems have started before they actually reach out to get help. And by that point, things haven't gotten better, right? Nothing gets better when you just let it simmer for 6 years. Things have only gotten worse. And so it can build up so much that not only is there stigma, but they're having to really say to themselves, is there something wrong with me? Or they're having to ask, did I marry the right person? All of these things which just go into, it's a lot, it's very vulnerable when you get to that point, right? And a lot of people, they don't know, and also they don't know who to trust or who to go to. That's another huge part of it. And what we have found is that counseling even if you look at the Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, that for couples who are in crisis, even their noted gold standard of success rate after a year of working with them is 50%. And after 2 to 3 years, it goes down to 30% because counseling can be very, very difficult. You have two couples or two people who are going in and talking with a counselor, and one of them doesn't want to be there. It's very easy for that person to shut down, to feel like they're being attacked, and to just kind of go along for the ride, but say, none of this applies to me. I don't want to be here. Which is why we're finding more and more that more of these group-based activities like seminars or conferences can be really effective because it doesn't feel
Right.
as focused on just the person who doesn't want to be there. It's for the group. And so you're able to hear it in a way differently than if you're just sitting in a counseling session.
Yeah, and not only that, it probably opens their eyes to, hey, we're not the only ones. Like these other people have similar problems that we do, or other problems that, wow, I'm glad that's not us, right? We're not that bad after all. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of stuff in your group sessions.
Everything. I mean, I tell people all the time, there's nothing at this point you could tell me that I have not heard because we've seen it all and we've seen all of those types of situations safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about COVID for a minute here. So oddly enough, a survey by Bowling Green State University revealed a surprise that divorce rates in the number of U.S. states this COVID time actually dropped. So they're looking at divorce rates dropping. So analysts believe that it may be due to couples simply delaying divorce for practical reasons during the pandemic. What are your thoughts on this, Kimberly?
I think like many of those people that there could be a lot of reasons. And even when we look at research, you have to look at it. It's so many angles. So could it be because of all the shutdowns? I know that many of the people who contacted us, they said courts were closed for a long period of time. And so their divorce proceedings ended up getting delayed. But there's also part of this that, and I would love to see that because couples were stuck together, it forced them to work on issues in a healthy way and they got healthier. I think that would be amazing.
And Kimberly, any final advice to anyone watching who has a marriage just hanging by a thread?
My best advice that I would give you is to please not give up hope. Because while what you're experiencing, I know hurts you're confused. You don't know who to trust. You don't know where to go. What I want to encourage you with is that there are things that you can begin to do. You can begin by working on yourself, becoming the best that you can be, and then also learning how to change the way that you communicate with your husband or with your wife, because those are the two things that begin to break down when marriages begin to break down. We lose sight of ourselves. We start focusing on our spouse and overanalyzing the relationship, getting our anxiety up, but we also lose sight of how to communicate well. And these are two important things that you can begin doing right now, no matter what your spouse is doing, no matter what they're focused on, no matter how they're responding.
That is some great advice there. Kimberly Holmes is the CEO of Marriage Helper. Thanks so much for your time today, Kimberly. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I really appreciated being with you.
Absolutely. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.